Hello everyone, I'm Jason from The Truth Behind the Magic, and today's going to be a bit of a different format. Blaze is not here with me today. This is technically going to be a part of our Disney College Program series, but it's not really the official start point. This is sort of just a side note, because it's something that I alone have experienced. Blaze was in a different area of the company, but on my latest college program, which I've done 3 summer alumni program, and 2023 was when I did Bell Services Dispatcher, so that's going to be the period that I'm talking about here. And pretty much the reason I wanted to do this was because I know for me personally, when I started to look at information about this before the program, hardly any of it exists. There are some good videos out there, but if you look at stuff from the past few years, there's maybe like 2 videos talking about it. The vast majority of it is a decade old. I mean, some of them are quite literally 10 years old or more. So it really is a lot of, frankly, outdated information. Well, some of it still stays true till today, but I feel like most videos I've seen, they fail to really give a true overview of what goes on in this role. So really my hope here is to give an all-encompassing view over what to expect, not just on the job, but really your first week when you get there in this role. What's the training like? What exactly are your job priorities going to be? Because a lot of the videos, I feel like, just give bits and pieces of what you're going to be doing. And really just some of the intricacies of this role. It's definitely different than anything I've seen outside of my time doing this role. Anything else in the company, I think, is very different. Maybe front desk concierge is probably the closest thing to this, but it is so different from anything I've done prior to this. So to give kind of a brief description, which first and foremost, something that everyone says, but it's very true and shouldn't be understated, is that you are not a bellman, which it is kind of funny that it's Bell Services, which yes, you are a part of that, but you are simply, just to put it simply, you are not a bellman, quite literally. There is a lot of overlap on what you will have to do, though, which I think a lot of the videos don't really state that either, is that you will have priorities and things you have to do that are very similar to what a bellman would do, and sometimes you quite literally have to do what they're doing. I've seen it happen. But if I had to boil it down into one paragraph, I would say that essentially your job is to facilitate the movement of bags, whether that be inside your resort or from your resort to another. In some strange occasions, you actually have to go pick up the bags from a different resort and bring them back. I've had to do that a few times. But yeah, that's pretty much it. You're in charge of facilitating, making sure guest requests get done, dispatching the bellman. You are the point of contact when it comes to Bell Services. You are quite literally the front line. When someone comes in a resort, you are the person they're going to ask about what they need to do with their luggage. So I figure a good starting point for this would be talking about what the training is like. And I would say for the most part, it's pretty much your standard Disney training, if you could kind of call it that standard. If you've done a program before or worked for the company, you pretty much know what I'm talking about. You get a week, sometimes 4 days, 5 days. I remember when I worked at Toy Story Mania, the entire ride shut down for 8 hours, pretty much our entire shift. And we were on the position where we were not allowed to leave until the ride came back up. So we lost an entire day of training, and that never got brought back to us. So we just ended up with one less day than we were supposed to get. But that's a completely different story. In this case, I believe it was 4 days. It may have been a 5th day, but the fifth day was not really a training day. But I'll kind of get into that in a minute. If you're doing any Disney job, your first day outside of traditions in the pre-job training is going to be your property orientation, which in my case, we did a tour. We had to do some D-Learn, which you will very quickly learn what D-Learn is. We got our costumes on the first day. They only allowed us to take 2, though. I was going to go ahead and get all 5, but they did not allow us to do that for some odd reason. Right after that, I think it was quite literally the day after. In this case, on this program, I may have had a break before the first day, though. you jump right into on-the-job training. And like I said, in my case, I believe it was 4 days of on-the-job training. I had 2 opening shift training days, 1 transfer shift, which we will talk about in depth, and 1 closing shift. The 5th day, which I honestly can't remember if it happened, it was not an assessment, which if you've done this before, you know what an assessment is. You usually have to take an actual written or online exam that if you fail, you have to do at least part of training again. And then there's a in-person assessment as well, where your trainer will look at what you're doing and basically tell you if it's up to par for what you need to do to actually get on the job for real. So as far as what you will be doing, I would say in most people's case, probably 90% of the time, maybe more, what I would just call your standard procedure is you're going to be on a computer, typically in the lobby. In some resorts, it's outside the lobby, but you're in like your own room. You're not in the elements or anything. I was at Coronado Springs, which obviously is a moderate resort, but it's a deluxe tower, so it felt like working at a deluxe resort, which you essentially are if you're in the tower. So we were inside the main lobby. It used to be outside in a separate, not outside in the elements, but it was in a separate room where they have the grocery room now. You'll get on your computer, log on to the hub, which you can probably find a lot more information about the hub on here, but we use a program called Hot Sauce, which I believe stood for the Hotel Service System. And it was tapped into not just Bell Services, but literally the entire operation of the resort. We could do work orders to housekeeping. We could do work orders to runners, although half the time we'd get a phone call from them complaining about it, even though it was literally their job to do whatever we were putting in there for them. So, being Bell Services, I will say this right now, you feel like you're at the bottom of the totem pole as far as the main lobby. I don't know what word I would use. The clique of the main lobby is concerned at the resort. Because for some reason, front desk concierge gets viewed like above you. At least in my case, they seem to get priority from the leadership. Especially if you wanted to cross train, they gave them most of the opportunities because they felt like they had already been doing some of those priorities in their regular day-to-day job. But I'm digressing into that. I'm sure I'll talk about that in a later episode. But yeah, you're pretty much on a computer system. If someone walks in and they want to check their bags, we used an actual tag system where we would pull out a tag, ask them for their name, how many bags it was. You'd tag you'd tag the main bag and then put a barcode on every other bag that went with it. And you would take it back, put it on a shelf, and log it on a physical paper log where it was. Some resorts may do it a little differently, which I will get into that a lot later, that there's a lot of like discrepancy between the resorts, but I would say that is something that's pretty much the same everywhere from what I've seen. If people call down, that's another thing, is you have a phone system. You have like an actual phone that it rings to if someone's calling Bell Services. You have a cell phone that is, if you need to contact a leader or something like that, you would use that cell phone. But mainly you're answering the actual landline phone, which logs in when you log into your computer. If someone calls down and says I need my bags, your job, like as I said at the beginning, is to be the facilitator. You would get on the computer, put in a work order, which basically you just say what the issue is, which would be bags to guest or something along those lines. And you would assign it to a bellman. You have like a queue of which bellmen are available. You assign one of them to that, and then you go from there. Grocery deliveries are another thing. This can vary from resort to resort, but in my case, coming from quick service on my first program, I thought it was very interesting that during training I had to take the like wine, the alcohol handling course on DLearn, which I was like, I guess I understand it because technically we can accept alcohol from vendors and give it to guests. But having to do like a 45-minute course or whatever that one is just to take a bag from someone and put their name on a log seemed kind of ridiculous to me. But that's, once again, another digression. Basically, for the groceries, Instacart or whoever will just show up and you log the guest information. In the later days that I was there, we started logging it electronically as well. We used a physical and electronic log, but as long as it was on one of them, like, it was acceptable. I tried to put it on both, but if you didn't, it wasn't the end of the world. It's pretty much all there is for groceries. At Coronado, we had a separate room where it used to be the old main Bell Services room, but most of the Instacart people and those kind of people knew it as, like, the main area. So we left that room open for grocery deliveries, and if anyone went to the main lobby, we would tell them in the future that you can go out there. And it had a direct entrance to the grocery room, so it was a lot better for everyone involved. But yeah, that's pretty much it for groceries. You just accept the deliveries, give the deliveries to the guests. That's another thing they can call down for. They can call down and say, I want my groceries. I believe they get charged like $1.50 or something. It went up when I was there, but a charge goes to their account basically just so it can cover the tip to the bellman. They get a fee per person that they have to take a grocery delivery to. Same with packages, that sort of thing. And as far as things that you'll be getting asked in work orders you'll have to put in, I can guarantee you're going to get people asking all the time to give you golf cart rides. Even though never in my life have I thought that golf cart rides are something Bell Services does. I don't know why anyone in their right mind thinks that's a thing. In our case, that was the lowest priority on the chain. So when you would put in the work orders, you would have to make sure there was nothing else waiting before you sent one of those. Unless they'd been waiting for like 2 hours, sometimes we would send it. But I've had people literally wait for 2 hours when it's an extremely busy night, and they'll come up and say, how come we haven't gotten a ride yet? And I just have to tell them, like, we have bellmen that are working on actual bellman activities that have to go ahead of this, and usually people end up walking after that. But at Coronado, it was really bad because we had about, I think it's 2,400 rooms. It's 2,200 or 2,400, something like that, and it's a massive resort. It's as big as the Magic Kingdom. Largest resort on property by room count and area. So people had to walk a long way. I will admit that. I think they should have a service that's specifically for transferring people like that, taking them around the resort, which in some resorts they do have that. But at Coronado, they used to have a position that was driving golf carts around, asking people if they want rides, but it never seemed to happen anymore when I got there, even though I heard it was something that could theoretically happen. Coming to the next big thing, which is transfers. And I know this is probably the topic of interest for a lot of people. This is what they really want to know about. And frankly, a lot of the videos out there don't give much information about this. A lot of people are nervous about having to drive a large company vehicle that is obviously not their own, having to have people's personal items inside of it, taking it to other resorts. Sometimes it can be a 15-20 minute drive. This is something I know a lot about because I pretty much became known as the transfer guy at Coronado when I was there because no one else wanted to do it, but I loved doing it. So I would trade every shift I could. Sometimes there were a couple weeks, even though I was only there for a few months, I had a couple weeks where that's all I did. 4 days. Which I only worked 4 days a week, because even if I got scheduled 5, I would give one away, because I've been through a program where I worked 6 days a week, and I was content doing 4 days this program. But anyway, yeah, I became very accustomed to that. I got to know people at every resort, just about, at least one person that I at least recognized. That's a good thing about this role is you get a lot of interaction with other cast members. Really, it's a great network there in Bell Services. The frontline cast there are just impeccable for the most part, really nice people. I never felt unwelcome at a resort. Well, there was one, but I'm not going to point it out because there were a lot of really good people there too, but they were just weird. Definitely not a resort that I like anyway, but pretty much it's relatively simple when it boils down to it. It can sound really imposing, but you don't have to take a driving test, which is kind of concerning that they're putting, in some cases, 18-year-old people driving these vans that may have not even driven like at all before. But you drive pretty much a large white van, just a standard white van. It has only 2 windows in the back. The back is just completely open. It's just a wide open cargo space. Doesn't have windows down the side. It's completely enclosed. Specifically, it's a Chevy Express Cargo, which I know that's what most, if not all, of the resorts use. Probably about a 2015 year or so. Not that that really matters, but if you wanted to look it up. Like I said, it's just a big open van in the back, 2 seats in the front. You have a backup cam, which I never had any issue backing up. That made it just a breeze. Even though it was a big vehicle, it didn't drive that big. It didn't feel like you were driving a massive vehicle. It was actually very pleasant to drive, honestly. They used to use box trucks, which I actually heard people talk at Coronado about the days where they had to use a box truck because there were so many transfers that day. But as far as I know, those are not used anywhere anymore, or at least most of the resorts stopped using them. So definitely do not worry about having to drive an actual large truck. Even if they had it, you honestly probably wouldn't have to drive it. I don't think there's that many transfers these days. You may have to use a passenger van, which could be the transport version of the Chevy Express, or like almost an Escalade looking SUV. I only had to do that 2 or 3 times. That's usually just if the transfer van is broken down for some reason, or in one case I had a leader. He actually gave away the transfer van to a different like segment of the company because they needed to use it for something, and he gave it away like 10 minutes before my shift started when I was supposed to have it as the transfer person. So just let that sink in, as maybe not the greatest reflection of all leaders, but that's what you'll see with some of them. So I had to use a transfer van. That was one of the busiest transfer days too, which you'll never really know what to expect in this role, but it was a lot of transfers that day, and I had to use a van that, on the passenger vans, you have a seated area and a very small cargo bay in the back. I had to use that for like 1 or 2 trips until I could get the other van back. Let's see here. Sorry, I have a few notes here that I'm kind of browsing through. And transfers are something that can vary heavily depending on your resort. The moderates in general, from what I could tell, do not get a ton of transfers. Obviously, you can have days where it's insane. Coronado typically had about 4 to 8 transfers a day. That means 4 or 8 parties, about 20 to 30 bags. And what you'll do is, when it comes in, if you're the person at the desk, you're working a normal Bell Services shift, you will tag each bag that is with that party with a specific color-coded tag. And they have each resort on them. There's like 4 different colored tags, and then each one has like 5 resorts or whatever, roughly. And you would circle where they're going. You would put it in the log. We typically had a paper log, but we also started using an electric log later, just if you needed to double check it. It was on Microsoft Teams. That's where a lot of stuff will be that you'll be using. But yeah, you just tag the bags. The transfer person, whatever day that is, will show up. I would always go in the back. I'd get a piece of paper that had lines on it where I could put each party, the number of bags, that sort of thing. I would always fill that out so I knew ahead of time exactly where stuff was going and how much it was. I would like triple, if not quadruple check the luggage room to make sure that it was all the transfers that had been tagged. I remember one day we actually had a party where the person didn't tag half the bags. They only had it was like 20 something bags in one party, but they tagged like 10 of them. So when we got to the resort later, we got called and they're like, we only have half the bags. I'm like, whose fault is this? But we eventually determined that it was whoever had tagged them that morning. But yeah, I would go through the luggage room, check that multiple times, go to the actual log of transfers, check that, make sure that I had all the parties there. Then what we did was we had a paper system where when you got to the resort you're taking it to, you would just put on the person's name, number of bags, where you left it in the other resort's luggage room. But they started to make us do a lot more involved, I guess I could say, where you had to log into Hot Sauce on a phone and fill out work orders as you went and take pictures of the bags, which in a way I understand because it proves that the bags got there. You have a picture format. But at the same time, with the internet down there, the pictures would basically never upload, but as long as they were on the phone, they said it was fine. But yeah, it's pretty simple when you really boil it down. With Coronado being a convention resort, there were a few days that were really busy because the most I ever had was when it got to the day right before a convention was starting, and it was a full resort buyout, which means that you either had to leave Disney property or leave that resort at least. So everyone left, and that day I believe it was 26 transfers and it was 175 bags. And it was just me doing it. They didn't assign anyone else, because why would they have the foresight to do that? Definitely would not expect that much of them. But it took me 3 trips, I believe, full load each time, which a full van load in those is quite a bit. It took me like an hour and a half just to load the thing, if I remember correctly. Sometimes it could take you a long time to load the van, so factor that in. At the very end of the day, they assigned a bellman. Well, they didn't assign him. He offered. He was a good friend of mine. But he said, I will help him do the rest of these. But it was already at like 6 p.m., which was 6.5 hours into the shift. So it was kind of past the point at that time. But it still helped. I appreciate that he did that. But yeah, you can get a lot with that. But typically, small numbers, easy. I actually liked it when I had a bit more, because it would take longer. And, you know, speaking of the hours of doing transfers, typically I would work. It varies from resort to resort. Ours was 11:30 to 8, but you were supposed to have everything done by 6 p.m. I think I only had one day where I didn't get it done by that, and it was that day where it was so crazy and it was just me. But typically it only took 2 or 3 hours to get it done, and then you pretty much chill for the rest of the day. You just assist the other people that are there. You don't have like a real priority. You're just kind of floating around. Some resorts, I think they have it set to 5 p.m. when they're supposed to have it done. Some are 7 p.m. from what I've seen, but it really just varies. As long as it gets there that day, then at least they have their bags. As I said, Coronado being a convention resort, we didn't have a lot of people transferring in or out. Moderates just as a whole don't have nearly as many as deluxe resorts from what I've seen. This is probably due to the fact that not many people do like the split stays between where they'll stay some days at like a value resort and then some days at a deluxe, so they can kind of split the cost and get to stay at a deluxe for a period of time. You get a lot of people transferring between the values and the deluxes, as well as the value and moderate. But value, I guess I'll go over this now. You cannot get placed in a value resort as a DCP, which I've seen other videos mention that. They are third party, which I'm fine with that. I mean, I would have no problem working at one of those, but they seem to have a lot of transfers because, like I said, a lot of people either go to the value resorts from somewhere else, or they split their stay and they go to a more expensive resort from there. Just from my own personal experience, the resorts that I had to transfer to the most, Pop Century was definitely number one. People love Pop for good reason. It's definitely, I would say, the greatest value in the value resort segment. So a lot of people transfer to there, a lot of people transfer from there to higher price resorts. Animal Kingdom Lodge, especially Jumbo House, seem to get a lot. Each resort there has its own bell services, so you have to deal with it in a multifaceted way. You can't just take everything to Jumbo House or something like that. Number 3 was probably Riverside, which was surprising. I didn't expect a lot of transfers to be going there, but at least from Coronado, it seemed like we were taking a lot there. In the last month that I was there, it was pretty much every day that I did it, something was going to Riverside. The luggage rooms vary widely at the resorts. Coronado actually had the best luggage room, and it's not even just me saying that because I'm biased. Pretty much anyone you ask at any resort will say, I love your luggage room. It was new. It was massive. It definitely the biggest by far at any resort. Some of them you almost feel like you're walking into a closet. Riviera I did not like. You had to go downstairs at the resort to transfer to their luggage. It was, I'll get into that in another video potentially, but it was a whole fiasco there. Where it was really good. Somewhere, I'm trying to think of a place that was really good. It's honestly kind of hard to think of anything when you worked at Coronado and you had like the primo luggage room, but no, it's fine anywhere you go though. It's not like you're gonna just have a terrible experience in the luggage room. Some of them it's hard to find space, but sometimes you just have to leave them on the floor. That's how it is, but yeah. When it comes to luggage rooms, not a huge part of the transfer process. You just take it there, find a place to put it, log it with whoever is working at their bell services, and you're good to go. Now, when it comes to training, specifically on transfers, I found it very interesting because, well, in my case, they scheduled someone to train me that was on vacation. Once again, not surprising considering the way things are at Disney sometimes, well, most of the time. But, so yeah, on top of that, the guy they chose to train me, I did end up getting trained that day, but I had no idea who was even training me until I showed up. They picked a guy who worked front desk concierge, and sometimes he was a runner as well, which that's a role where you pretty much just do whatever you are told to do and help out the rest of the resort, take things between resorts, that sort of thing. He was from that area of the company. He had just finished up a full shift in that before he even started training me. But anyway, that's kind of a side note digression. Training for transfers, you just drive around. The trainer will show you where the main drop-off areas are. If it's a good trainer, they will show you every resort, or at least if a resort is exactly like another one, they will tell you exactly how that works and tell you what to expect if you go to that resort. Luckily, my trainer was very good. He was like the transfer guy before me because he worked full-time in bell services. He wasn't at Coronado, but he worked at a lot of the different resorts, which you will see that in bell services people pick up at every resort because it's so similar that you basically can do that. But he did a really good job. He was very thorough, showed me everywhere I needed to go. Unfortunately, if you have a bad trainer, I think this is going to be a really rough area for that because they could just decide they're only going to show you half the resorts or just do a really bad job of showing you where to go. There's also a lot of codes you have to keep up with. We had a note on the back of the van. It was taped in there that had the door codes for every resort. For the ones you needed a door code to get into their luggage room, some of them you did. But even those were changing all the time, so sometimes you had to ask people literally, how do I get in here? Where do I put this? But even with a good trainer, and this is the way it is with a lot of Disney, but especially for transfers, you basically have to learn as you go. You are not going to be able to remember all 20 whatever resorts on the first day of training, one day of training. You're not going to be able to remember all that when you get scheduled a month later to go to Yacht Club or whatever. You're most likely not going to remember exactly what to do, especially at some of the more intricate ones. Pop's Injury was very interesting. You had to park behind the lobby and walk like 100 yards through the woods to get to their luggage room. But yeah, learn as you go. My first shift out of training was a transfer shift, so it was very much a trial by fire. But I thought that was good. I learned a lot on that day. And throughout my time there, I was only there for 3 months, but I technically did transfers to every Disney resort. The only resort that I didn't, it was either the Swan or Dolphin. It was one of those, but I don't even count it because it's technically not a Disney resort, so I still say that I transferred to every one. But, yeah, I would say don't be worried about that. You will pick it up over time. It's a fun, very, like, free feeling job to do there. When you have transfers, you get to be your own boss. You can take your time driving around. I mean, don't like purposely go like 5 miles per hour or go to McDonald's or something, but you can pretty much be your own boss. And a big tip I would give is utilize your GPS. Like, as long as you are not literally texting while driving around Disney property in a company van, they're not going to care. Bring up Google Maps or Apple Maps, whatever, and type in the resort you're going to. Unfortunately, you can't type in, like, Yacht Club Bell Services, and it will take you right there. You kind of just have to wing it once you get up to most of the places. The vast majority of places you do just pull up directly in front of the resort, under the porte-cochere, and you go from there. That's the way the vast majority of them are. There are a few that are kind of interesting, but typically, I mean, even if you went to the wrong place, it would be fine. You could just ask someone, where am I supposed to take this? Like, even if you drive up to the front and you're not supposed to be there, they will help you. And this is an area in the company where I would definitely say, do not be afraid to ask questions. I had to ask questions all of the time when I was doing transfers. Yeah, you just learn as you go. It will be fine. Definitely do not worry about that aspect. I ended up liking transfers way more than the actual day-to-day work, which was not bad in its own. But just for me, I really liked the freedom of being able to do that. And kind of going into some of the intricacies and the discrepancies of this role, that's a big thing about it, is that you really do... You have more freedom and more responsibility than really any other role. I mean, there are some others that are on that level, but most of the CP roles, you almost feel like you're a step above, even though you're not a step above in pay grade. You shouldn't be in hubris. You should be humble about it, but you definitely have a lot more freedom. But with that comes responsibility. I mean, you're driving a company van. It can be very stressful when you're doing that. People come to you, you have to solve the problem, which I felt like was a lot more responsibility than quick service or attractions in my experience. But I was fine with that. I liked that responsibility. I felt like it was almost a step above. Your day-to-day... I can barely talk today, I'm sorry. Your day-to-day job responsibilities can vary heavily from resort to resort in this role, though. That is something I would say. That's why even though I'm doing this video and I'm telling you everything I know, it can be some serious variation between places in certain aspects. Most of it's going to be the same, like the hot sauce system, as far as I know, is the same everywhere. It can maybe have its little intricacies, but for the most part, it's the same. Transfers are typically the same. But some examples of where it can differ is Animal Kingdom Lodge. Their dispatchers actually had a position called shuttle driver, which you would drive basically a bus. I mean, it's like a truck with seats in the back. It's not literally a bus, but you drive that between the two Animal Kingdom lodges and take people between the two. Grand Floridian had a Pargo driver, which a Pargo is a golf cart. That's just kind of like the Disney term for it. Well, I'm sure it's used outside of Disney as well, but that is something we didn't have, as I mentioned earlier. They got rid of that position essentially at Coronado. But Coronado itself, being a convention resort, had some very distinct things about it. It's the largest convention resort on property by far. Boardwalk has a convention center. Yacht and Beach Club do as well. Contemporary does. But the one at Coronado is crazy. It's like a full convention center. They can take like entire yachts in there and stuff. Massive rooms, which you will find out when you have your tour of Coronado, if you get put there, that it feels almost like a park inside there backstage. It's something. It's not like any resort I've seen. But being a convention resort, we had days where we had what was called luggage holds, where you'd have a massive amount of people coming in for a convention, like 800 or 1,000 check-ins in a day, sometimes more. I never had to be a part of this, but people would go down to the convention center. They would check guests in there and put their bags in a certain room. It's a simpler process. You don't log it all. You don't log all the work orders and stuff. You kind of just put a tag on their luggage and leave it there until they come back later. We had some massive arrival and departure dates, which that's being Coronado with how large it is. You can have a really big amount of people checking out at one time, which that can make for some very interesting situations. And another thing is kind of tying into what I said earlier about being the bottom of the totem pole in the main lobby, you kind of get assigned random tasks from your leaders from time to time. Kind of similar to what a runner would do, but not the same thing. But if they don't have a runner, they'll ask you to do something, at least from what I've seen. Some things I had to do a parking lot shift where I was down there for an entire shift, just making sure people didn't go against traffic, go the wrong way down the bus lane, because we had a convention up down there. I've had to set up cones a couple times where they literally sent me down to the old luggage room and I got some cones out and then put them in a parking lot to block off a certain spot. Searching for bell carts, that's something else. We had one cast member there that loved to do that. He would just walk around looking for bell carts, which the reason we didn't give them out that much. And when I say bell cart, I'm talking about the full thing, the rack that you can put stuff on and push around to your room. We didn't like to give those out because with how big Coronado is, people would leave them at their room, which that could be up to, a 10-minute walk away from the bell desk. So occasionally we would drive around on golf carts and look for those and drop someone off so they could walk it back. One very distinct memory I have is there was a woman whose scooter broke down at the bus station, and I spent about an hour, at least 45 minutes to an hour, helping her. I went down to the bus stop, pushed her back into the lobby. I literally had to push the cart back. I'm sorry, my voice is kind of breaking a little bit. I'm a little bit under the weather right now, but had to push her scooter back up. I called Scooter Bug, which is the company Disney has partnered with, got them to bring her a new scooter. I was on the phone with them for a good 15 minutes just backstage. Like, I'm sure the cast out front wondered what was going on, but as long as you have all the people there with you in bell services, sometimes it can be so slow that someone could disappear for an hour and you probably wouldn't even notice. Honestly, you shouldn't do that, but I have seen it happen. I've seen worse than that, but yeah, very, very unique situations. You do get the chance to do some magical moment type stuff. Maybe not as much as some of the other roles, but you do get some good guest interaction. Probably not quite as much as front desk or concierge, but it's still there. And I guess that's a good segue into kind of my last topic, that is, this role is definitely not for everyone, but some people are going to absolutely love it. If you're someone that loves the resorts, you prefer them to the parks like I do. I've worked in a few resorts and worked in the parks as well. I worked in Hollywood Studios. I would never work in a park. Well, I shouldn't say I would never work in a park again, because I would in certain roles, but I just prefer the resort feeling. I like being in hospitality, being in the lobby. If you're someone like that, this is definitely something for you, because I think they do allow you to rank your roles on the college program now, which, if you're watching this soon after it comes out, we're going to be doing a college program series starting soon, me and my co-host Blaze, where we talk about, the application process, what your first week down there looks like, that sort of thing. We'll have a long series of that going up. But yeah, if you want to be in the resorts, I would say it should be one of your prime options. If you prefer a slower paced environment over the hustle and bustle, you're going to enjoy this. Going from quick service and working at Toy Story Mania to this was like a shockwave in a good way for me, but I didn't know there was a role at Disney that was like this, like chill. I thought it was pretty much all just hustle and bustle. But on the downside of that, you might literally get bored, because you do have to stand around. I think the longest I went without putting in a work order was 3 hours. So you'll be standing at a desk for 3 hours. You usually can't even sit down. And you only get one break in the middle. You get an hour break if you work an 8.5-hour shift, and it's all at one time. They really won't let you split it up. Which that was one unfortunate thing, but it's getting kind of nitpicky, I guess. Because that's how most jobs are. If you have a safety critical role at Disney, you'll get multiple breaks throughout the day, but I'm sorry, I'm kind of digressing here. Kind of tying in with that, of sometimes not a lot going on, you might feel like you're not getting a lot of chances to make those magical moments, which, granted, you don't get as much guest interaction as you would in some roles. If you're someone that wants to work in the parks, obviously you shouldn't really consider this, which I understand the viewpoint of wanting to work in the parks. I definitely do not regret doing it. I would definitely do it again, because that's when you feel like you're in Disney. I will admit that I almost feel like everyone should work in the parks, at least one program. I mean, I know I've done 3, but it's something you really should do to feel like you're really doing the program. So if you want to be in the parks, this obviously isn't going to be for you. Let's see here. Sorry, checking my notes once again, getting kind of derailed here. You have less power than front desk or concierge to really do things. But you do have a considerable amount of power compared to other roles, though. That is for sure. Like I said, coming from quick service and attractions, you feel like you're kind of on another echelon of responsibility. Some people may feel that the role is not Disney enough, which is kind of tying into what I was saying about if you want to work in a park. This really isn't the best for you. It kind of just feels like you're working at a standard resort in Bell Services as opposed to working for Disney, which I was fine with that. That's really kind of what I like to do on the program. And of course, some people may be very unsettled by having to drive a large company vehicle, but I know I spent a lot of time on that, so don't feel as bad about that as you might. I hope this video has made you feel better about that. It's really a very chill part of the job. But yeah, definitely not for everyone. Some people will love it. Some people will probably hate every minute working there just because they're going to get bored. But that's, believe me, it's a luxury to have this boredom working for Disney. If you've worked in a really busy role, or you end up working in a really busy role, you will understand that. But there is something to the hustle and bustle, though. Like, I did at times wish that I was working a quick service shift or an attraction shift. Like, not that I would want to go back to that first time full time, but if I could work like 1 or 2 days in a fast paced role a week, I probably would, just because sometimes you need that shot of adrenaline. Something really good about this role, though, is there's a large group of people. There's a large shift trade group. So if you want to give away or trade a shift, as long as your leadership is good with it, which now I think they actually changed it to where you don't even need leader approval to trade a shift. Yeah, that was actually at the end of my program. You can give away a shift without leader approval, which is how it should have always been, as long as you didn't go below the hour limit. But it's very easy to give away a shift. You post it on the Facebook group, you'll have it gone in 10 minutes, typically an hour at most. And to just kind of finish off, I loved my time there. I loved the freedom of it. I liked the pace of it, although, like I said, there were times where I wish it would be a little more fast-paced, but overall, I liked the responsibility. I liked feeling like I was actually making a difference in the day, and every cast member does. I'm certainly not trying to belittle quick service or attractions or anything, because I've worked pretty much at the lowest point of the company, but you just kind of feel like when you're driving that van around, you're like, wow, I'm actually in a company vehicle. They trust me to do this. Like, it has a different feeling to it. And I had a really good cast there at Coronado, which I know I'll talk about in later videos, that having a good cast can make or break your program in a sense, but really good supporting cast. And yeah, really, just, I think if you end up getting this role, you will end up liking it, unless you just had your heart set on working in a park. I think you will really end up loving it, and you'll be glad that you got this. Stay there as long as you can. Stay there a year if you can. I had to leave for my last semester of college, but yeah, good luck to anyone who gets the role. I'm sure you'll do fine. Don't worry about transfers. That's pretty much all I have here. And like I said, if you're watching this video shortly after it comes out, or whenever, it's good to see you in virtual form. But be on the lookout for me and Blaze's upcoming series on the college program. We've got a lot coming. We're going to take you through the whole process, take you through our experience there. It's going to be really great. But other than that, I will see you next time.